Yes, folks, hello, welcome once again to Monetary Games and Collectibles. It's time for another action figure review here on the channel, and as you can see on the screen in front of you right now, today's installment is going to be taking a closer look at the G.I. Joe Classified Series Mainframe figure. So stick around, I'm going to give you all the ins and outs, ups and downs that you need to know about Mainframe, so that if you've been thinking about picking one up for yourself, you'll have good, thorough information to make a purchase decision around. I'm going to start by taking a look at the packaging on the day Mainframe arrived on my doorstep, then move on to the figure, talk about the aesthetic and the visual experience, talk about the articulation and posability, and then get into the third A, which is accessories and added value. And with all that said and done, you should have plenty of info, all the info you might need to know. So if you've got a pre-order, you can decide whether you want to keep that pre-order or not. If you're walking down the aisle in Target and you see him, you can make that impulse decision to buy him or not based on my recommendation and the info I give you today. So let's get into it and let's get back in time to visit past Chris on the day Mainframe arrived on my doorstep. Let's do it. And here we are then, folks. Here is Mainframe in packaging, and as you can see, it's the standard G.I. Joe Classified Series packaging that we're getting nowadays. Got the carbon fiber little pattern motif in there, G.I. Joe Classified Series across the bottom, the Joe symbol, because he's a Joe, his name at the top, Blaine, Mainframe, Parker, all the usual stuff, and of course, the window there showing off the figure and all the goodies. Then on the back here, we've got the digital render of Mainframe in action. Looks like he's getting, little comm station set up on a crate, a dock somewhere, maybe. Anyway, it's looking good. Got a couple breakout windows there showing off a few of the key features. This is import stock that's coming from overseas. Once again, massive shout out to In Demand Toys here in the UK for their fine work importing stuff over. Legal bollocks and malarkey at the bottom. And then, of course, we've got the file card information, the attributes. So let's zoom in on those and learn a bit about Mainframe together, shall we? All right, then, well, first up here, we've got what looks like a laptop on the surface, and you might be forgiven for thinking that because it's Mainframe. However, it's not a laptop. This is actually the view screen on the deck of the Starship Enterprise, on the command deck of Starship Enterprise, because Mainframe's a massive trekker. And the Star Trek love doesn't finish there with these attributes, because this last one here, that's an Organian. That's an energy being, the Organians. This here is a Nokia 8110. Because Mainframe, being a sci-fi fan, is also a lover of the Matrix. And you might be forgiven for thinking that's a computer chip there, but it's not. That's actually just a squash spider that Mainframe splatted with a slipper in the bathroom. Then on the side here, you can see that he's number 178 in the line, and then we've got some artwork up the spine there. It's okay, this one. I mean, I've mentioned several times of late that I'm becoming less and less impressed with this artwork. And then the other side, 178 in the line, the attributes again, the sepia tone version of the artwork, and the QR code to know when. And there it is, folks. There's a look at the packaging. So if you're minting box or you're just interested in the peg presents, there's the rundown. But I'm not minting box, so I'm going to go and crack Mainframe open here now, get good and hands-on, get some playtime in, have him as a desk figure for a day or two, put him in some displays, try him out next to some other Joes, and jot down some review thoughts. And future Chris is going to come back and share those review thoughts with you in 3, 2, 1. All right then, folks. Well, on to the review section of the video now then, and I'm going to start by talking about the aesthetic qualities, the visual experience of Mainframe. And here he is, just the core figure as he came out the packaging, raw, without any of the embellishments or accessories added on there. Full head-to-toe look to get us started so that you can eyeball that, folks. And once again, I think you can see that they are continuing the trend, the 2025 trend with G.I. Joe Classified, where they're leaning very heavily into the vintage figure inspiration. So he's got the grey shirt, the grey pants, the black trimmings in there. His little bandolier here has got all the kind of silver techie bits on it, which the original figure had, and the shiny silver belt buckle which the original figure had, and the insignia on the shoulder. So all very much in line. And then when we have a look at the helmet later, you'll see that it's the classic helmet. Kind of steering clear of the... I remember him in the cartoon being more kind of white-shirted, or certainly a much lighter grey. Perhaps that'll be the retro card back release. But yeah, you can see sticking very firmly to that core vintage inspiration, although they have added some embellishments and kind of brought it to life more in the 6-inch plastic form. Moving in a bit closer so we can get an inspection of the finer details conducted. You can see the head sculpt's pretty damn solid there. Nice facial features. Good paint applications on the eyes and the eyebrows, carrying that kind of stoic vanilla look in the facial features there, which is sometimes a blessing, sometimes a curse. We've all been there when we tried to take a photo and I found the vanilla face a bit too vanilla, but that's all fine. The hair sculpt is decent, although obviously contoured to accommodate the helmet fitting on the top of his head, which we'll have a look at a little bit later on. But yeah, good solid head sculpt there. And then, as you can see, moving down further into the figure, lots of paint applications and embellishments just to really give it some depth and bring it to life. We've got these little kind of techie pieces of kit here attached to his bandolier with little display screens and symbols and arrows and stuff on. Got a little piece of silver, maybe an insignia there across the top of his shirt, and then the two tones of greys in the shirt there, up the buttons and the clasps at the top here and the collar, as well as the t-shirt underneath his shirt. Lots of other extra details as well. You know, there's a bit of a leathery look in here on the bandolier. We've got his holster, which is pegged on to this strap here, which is a bit of an interesting twist. Literally, it twists around. But that's got some sculpted details in there and a nice leathery look to it. Got his insignia here on his shoulder. That looks like it might be a decal there, but a nice little splash of colour just to break things up a bit. Down on his wrist here as well, you can see he's got this little kind of PDA display thing that's strapped around his wrist. And it's got a little display screen as well with a load of code on it, and another little splash of colour with the red wiring leading up to it. While we're on the subject of a little splash of colour, you can see he's got a couple of coloured cables here strapped to his belt as well, a yellow one and a red one. Which is nice to see, and they're fairly well sculpted, although the paint apps are a little bit splodged on. Always a big fan of a sculpted, painted belt buckle here at Mod Extra Games and Collectibles, and Mainframe does not disappoint. You can see he's got this silver belt buckle there with like is that an eagle or some sort of bird of prey on it? And then moving further down into the body, you can see we've got yet more details in here. He's got his knife sheath there, and again with a kind of leathery look effect on it. He's got a little pouch for carrying one of his communications pieces of kit, one of his communication gear, and again you can see some textured detail in there. The pants themselves are textured. This is reuse of tunnel wrap, I think, off the top of my head, with the knee pads in there as well, looking suitably shiny and knee paddy with some sculpted details, and then the little, very practical, comfortable boots that are well polished. Mainframe is on top of his boot polishing game. One thing I did notice, it could be one of those things that bother you, it might not be, I don't know, but here on the legs, on the knees, where the knee pad is, you can see you got this black painted stripe that goes all the way around to the back, and the knee joint is in black plastic, which is fine around the back here, but then when you come around the front, when you've got him posed in like running and standing and, you know, shooting poses, kneeling poses and stuff, you see the black plastic on top of the grey. So they could have really done with a bit of black paint in the joins there to, you know, match that up. Now that's obviously easily fixed with a little bit of paint in there, but it's just one of those like kind of attention to detail things that you don't normally see them overlook with G.I. Joe Classified. So yeah, thumbs up on the aesthetics. The visual experience with Mainframe is solid. It's sound, lots of nice details in there, good textures. Yeah, it's a good 6-inch interpretation of the vintage look figure. So if you're looking for that nostalgia, you're looking for a 6-inch version of your vintage figure, or you want a more kind of comic book accurate, he was in the kind of greys head to toe in the comic books, then this is your guy. Keep your eye out for the retro card back white shirted version coming in 2026. But yeah, overall, I've enjoyed him. He looks good, and he pairs up well with the likes of Dialtone and stuff. You can get a nice little scene going with them. I'll show you him next to Dialtone a little bit later on. So that's the aesthetic, that's the visual experience. Let's now take a closer look at his articulation and posability, shall we? And before we start on the articulation, folks, just draw your attention to the fact that there's chapters in the video. It's pretty standard G.I. Joe Classified series articulation. So if you're good on that, you don't need to know. You can skip ahead to the accessories section of this review. Please do avail yourself of the timestamps marked out in the timeline down below. However, if this is the very first G.I. Joe Classified series review you've ever watched, or you're interested to know whether there's any particular quirks with Mainframe, then stick around and I'll walk you through it, and I'll get started with the head. And up on the top here, then, it's the ball in the base of the skull, ball in the base of the neck. So you got you down to there, you got up to there, and then it's the full 360 all the way around and tilt and swivel on the ball top there. So nice range of motion. As you'll see a little bit later on as well, the helmet doesn't particularly get in the way of that. Moving down into the shoulders, you can see you got the butterfly joint there, giving you some shuffle forward and back. And it's the peg and hinge in the armpit going all the way around 360, and you can T-shape out to there. Just as a brief side note, a little bit crunchy up here. I had to apply some heat, and now I have done. He's almost gone the opposite way. I may have overdone it a bit. Then we've got swivel there at the top of the bicep and tricep. pinless double elbow that will get you up to there. Then it's the pegged-in hands at the wrist, which can go all the way around in the wrist joint there. And then we've got an up and down hinge on this one. And then there is a forward and back hinge on this one, but I found it a little bit restricted and tight due to the kind of little PDA wrist thing. Moving into the torso, it's the classic G.I. Joe classified hinge across the ab crunch there, and then a ball in the waist joint. The crunch is fine. I mean, you get loads of forward motion and backwards motion, but doing too much with the ab crunch, you can see here, it creates all these kind of sticky outy bulges in the bandolier webbing and stuff, and it makes this waist belt ride up all the time, look, which I'm forever pulling down. Then it's the drop-down joints in the hips and the groin there. Again, these are fine, other than the fact that you've got these kind of bits of connected brackets and braces and stuff and belts. But it's, the movement's there. It's just a little bit bulgy again, because when you go the forward kick like that, you can see it all kind of folds a bit weird. Although the Russian ballet splits are all right. I've got to admit, that's the first time I've tried that on camera. You can see it's definitely lifting the belt up, though. Then we've got the swivel at the top of the thigh there. Pinless double knee that will get you up to there. We've got an ankle joint in here, just underneath the bottom of the trouser leg, allowing you to do some swivel at the ankle, and then the standard hinge and rocker for the feet. So it's solid articulation, thumbs up. Most of the poses that I tried to get him into, all the stuff my imagination wanted me to do with him when I was taking some pictures yesterday, were possible to do. The articulation allows it. It just requires a little bit of patience and finessing with these belts and straps, just to make sure you're pulling things down and lining them up. The gun holster as well often needs straightening up in that little peg. That's all kind of negligible stuff as long as you've got the patience and the time to do it. So yeah, rock solid. No complaints here. All right, well, there's articulation. Let's now take a look at his accessories and added value, shall we? And to get us started with the accessories and added value, we've got the head swap here. So this is a baseball capped head with has a headphones communication device over the top. The grey colour of the baseball cap matches the rest of the uniform, and then the red insignia with the silver symbol on it matches up with the red insignia with the silver on the side, at least in terms of colour scheme. So that's nice to see. The facial features are just as good as on the other head. He's a good, solid, stoic communicator dude with excellently applied paint applications. Pretty decent all around there. Got the sculpted detail in on the back of the baseball cap. Nice bit of flavour. Can never go wrong with a decent head swap that opens up a wider world of possibilities in terms of the way you might want to display your figure, or might want to photograph your figure, etc., etc. That's not the only piece of accessory Mainframe's got going up top in the headspace, because we've also got his classic look helmet here. That's in a very sheer black with the silver insignia on the front in the classic shape and design that you guys all know and love from the vintage character and from the comic books and the cartoons, etc., etc. I've got to admit, it feels like it's a bit kind of super domey over the top of his head there, and then feels a bit tight and sheer around the sides. But fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just, that's to me, it just looks a bit kind of domey. I must admit, considering I wanted a classic look Mainframe, I'm leaning more towards the baseball cap head. To be honest, but it's there, and it's pretty vintage accurate, that. Then getting started with his wide selection of kind of comms geary type stuff. We've got this little kind of radio communicator thing here, which I keep dropping, but you can see there, let's get it in focus, got a little screen on it there, says calling with the text on it, some sculpted details, a little speakerphone bit at the bottom there, that's all nice and dandy with a kind of folded over aerial on the top. Nice piece of communications gear. And then that's got a bit of storage on the figure. He's got a little thigh holster here, which that sits in there, like so. Then we've got his little laptop case type thing here. You can see that it's got some sculpted details in, got the handle on it there, although the handle's a bit squishy. And all those kind of details. But of course, this comes to life most when you open it up. When it's opened up like this, so you can see we've got the keyboard there with the keys sculpted in, a little touchpad, mouse pad on there, then a little sticker decal on the screen with loads of readouts and information and stuff. That's all nice to see. There is a little screen extender here, but mine's dead loose. Just keeps, if you pull it out to there, just sort of, just flops out. They've got these couple of little teeth on it there, on the screen extender, but there's nothing in here. nothing in here that's stopping that movement all the way out. I don't know if there's supposed to be, or I've not watched anyone else's review. I'll probably go and investigate after I've recorded this, but let me know in the comments below whether I'm supposed to have something to stop that coming out there, which is a pain on another level, which I'll show you in a minute. However, that aside, that kind of design flaw there, yeah, obviously great, obviously fully in line with Mainframes, specialism and function in the G.I. Joes. Then we've got his backpack here, a lovely piece of sculpted backpack action going on here. Once again, massive shout out to the backpack sculptor over in the G.I. Joe Classified Series team. Again, a little kind of sticker decal on there, giving some readouts and information. Little speaker, fan on it and stuff, aerial sticking up the top. And then as I go around to the side here, you can see we've got a little peg hole and a little holdy thing, which is for these bits here. And then there's a little peg hole in the bottom. And then round the back, you can see we've got a little sculpted bit of back padding. So this here, obviously, is another little radio device. Got a little aerial on it, little readout screen, some sculpted details. Then we've got the classic kind of piece of cable piping that we've seen with G.I. Joe Classified Series before, with plugs at either end. And that just with a little bit of a push, pegs into the hole there. And then this little peg hole at the side, you can see you've got these this little plug shape on the back of the communicator, so you can plug it in like so. And then this plug hole at the bottom, I think, is to plug his case into like that. It seems like a pretty solid fit. It can only go in that way round, but as I mentioned before, the loose screen becomes problematic because it comes away like that. The Mainframe comes with a small arms loadout here. He's got a little pistol and a little dagger. These are fine. We've seen these in the line before. The pistol's a single piece of sculpted plastic in the black plastic there, and the dagger is the single piece of sculpted plastic with the paint application on the blade. So yeah, these are fine and dandy, and both of these can be stored on the figure itself. We've got the holster here on his chest, which you pop your little holster strap out and slide that in like so. The stud on here seems all right, folks. Doesn't seem to pop loose. Seems to sit nice and tight, unlike some of the others in the line. But I still think that's a flawed piece of engineering nonetheless. And then the dagger just goes in on this sheath, or knife, I should say, goes in on the sheath on his thigh there. So yeah, this is definitely a thumbs up. I love when we get a specialist in the Joes with some balmy equipment, just with a little bit more flavour and something curious and interesting going on. And Mainframe ticks those boxes for me. Decent stuff, apart from the weird side screen on the laptop. It's decent gear, it's useful, it gives him a bit of personality, a bit of character in amongst the lineup. Allows you to take some more interesting photos of some different types of action scenes. So I'm all for it. And the head sculpt on the alternative head's really lovely too. Great to have options if you want the classy look, or if you want something a little bit more modern looking, more plastified eyes, then they've got you covered, so that's really wonderful. Okay, so that's the accessories and added value. Let's take a quick look at Mainframe here next to a couple of other figures, shall we? Here's Mainframe with his old buddy Dial Tone there, and I gotta say, by comparison, Dial Tone looks a lot more bulky, and certainly a wee touch taller as well. I know I've got Mainframe's knees bent there, but Mainframe is a short arse compared to a lot of the other figures. That'll be the use of the tunnel rat legs, I suspect. Here's Mainframe next to the Retro Scarlet, who you'll notice I'm not kitted up with any of the gear because, well, basically I only had so much time and I had to dedicate that to trying to get her to stand. I didn't even plan that. Here's Mainframe next to fellow wavemate Sci-Fi, who I'll be recording the review of tomorrow, maybe the day after. So watch this space, that'll be coming soon. And here's Mainframe with Zorana. Okay, folks, well, here is Mainframe going round on the turntable so you can get a nice 360 look at the figure. And while you're having a look at that, I'll share some final thoughts. And as you can probably tell from the review, he's been a fun little desk figure for the last couple of days. I have enjoyed playing around with him, posing more. Some of the pickies I took I thought were quite interesting, something a little bit different, like I did with Dial Tone, really, just find him a little bit of something more interesting in the specialism that brought the man-child playtime to life a little bit more for me in my older age. It wasn't so much about charging around going pew pew, which is a lot of fun. I think loading them up with tons of really interesting accessories is great. The fact that most of them can be carried on the figure as well is even better. Yeah, it's just been a real good figure to play around with, and I've had a lot of fun, and what more can you want? I know that there's been a bit of chatter around on the socials. I saw some of my Joe Bros commenting on it, that he's a bit shorter than some of the other figures in the line. As I mentioned before, I think that's because of the use of the tunnel rat legs, but that doesn't bother me, you know. It takes all shapes and sizes, doesn't it? And so that's fine. You know, if he does get together with Zorana, then, you know, it's a high difference, and that's the end of that. So overall, yeah, thumbs up. Definitely recommend this figure. Good, classic character in a good, classic design with some interesting stuff for some solid man-child playtime. And if you want to make some displays, want to do some dios, take some photos, this guy opens up a lot of options, you know, and he fits in well with the rest of the Joes. So there you go. All right, folks, well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. If you have been thinking about picking up a mainframe of your own, then it's I hope I've helped you make your decision. Helped you make your purchase decision there. If you did do the YouTubey stuff, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Otherwise, all that remains to say is thanks for watching. Come back again for another video sometime soon, and I hope you have a great day. All right, bye-bye now.